Hello, hello, Jordan Sheridan live. Status Coup. We are, what are we? I'm always forgetting the day. I guess it's fatherhood. It is Tuesday, June the 6th, 2023, in the United Corporations of America. Tragically, Steve Grumbine had to bail 2 minutes before we went live. Something to do with his dog shitting everywhere. So I am sorry to hear that. We hope everything goes well with your dog. My dog has been very, very unruly and very jealous since we have a new child, to the point where she is refusing to walk at certain points where I have to carry her. I'm trying to avoid a third back surgery, but carrying this 30-pound dog because she won't continue walking has been really becoming a problem, but I digress. So hopefully everything works out with Steve, but we do have a great guest coming up. So excited about that. Please smash the like button so we can get this out to as many people as possible. More people that press like, the more people that will see. We're going to talk about Cornel West's surprising presidential announcement. Obviously, it's getting a lot of discussion, not just because he's running for president, but the party, or I guess you can't really call him a party, the organization he's running under. So we'll talk about that. Obviously, we were live for almost 4 hours yesterday for part of the hearing on the Cop City funding vote, which is really, really powerful. I'm glad we got to show so many of the speeches. This is America, so obviously democracy did not ring. And the Atlantic City Council voted to fund this militarized police compound. So we will give you an update on that. There's also news as far as Norfolk Southern. So we're just going to cover all around corruption, corporate greed, and bad things. So please smash the like button, share this live stream. On the Cop City front, reminder, we are planning on sending Tina back to Cop City at the end of this month. There's another week of action. So just because the city council voted for the funding, which is just, I'm not shocked, but really disgusting, considering I think it was 99% of the people who spoke yesterday were against it, and they voted against the will of the people, which shows you democracy is not ringing. But the fight against Cop City will continue. I believe potentially, I'm not comparing this to a Standing Rock, but I do think you could see an influx of activists and protesters get down to Atlanta as summer approaches and the weather gets nicer, because this is about, obviously it's about much more than just Atlanta and one facility. This is about so many different problems in America, from the police brutality to racism to corporate greed to militarized police and corrupt local government. So we'll get to that in a bit. But first, let's start with the Cornel West announcement. Joining me is a friend of the coup, Renee Johnston. She was a volunteer for MPP and does a lot of great political organizing. You've dipped your toe into Socialist Alternative and other groups as well. And I believe you were the first person not to complain about MPP, the Movement for a People's Party, but to get it out there through some of the independent media shows. So I wanted to have you on. Obviously, the focus is not just that he's running MPP. He's running third party, which is interesting to discuss, but you can't really get around the fact that Cornel West chose to run under, at this point, I would say, a pretty disgraced organization. I think most objective people would say that. We'll get to those reasons, but for anyone living under a rock, if you haven't seen, let's start with Cornel West's announcement video, which kind of came out of nowhere. I was not expecting an announcement that he was running for president. So let's take a look.
In these bleak times, I have decided to run for truth and justice, which takes the form of running for president of the United States as a candidate for the People's Party. I enter in the quest for truth. I enter in the quest for justice. And the presidency is just one vehicle to pursue that truth and justice, what I've been trying to do all of my life. I come from a tradition where I care about you. I care about the quality of your life. I care about whether you have access to a job with a living wage, decent housing, women having control over their bodies, health care for all, de-escalating the destruction of the planet, the destruction of American democracy. Democracy creates disruption. It creates an eruption. It creates an interruption. Wide from below, the energies of everyday people is manifest. And I know there are precious people in your life who you care for. That's why it's important for you to be involved, important for you to participate. We're not talking about hating anybody. We're talking about loving. We're talking about affirming. We're talking about empowering those who have been pushed to the margins, because neither political party wants to tell the truth about Wall Street, about Ukraine, about the Pentagon, about big tech.
Neo-fascists like Brother Trump or milquetoast neoliberals like Brother Biden. Wow, well, I'm so happy to make a world-shaking decision. You know what I mean?
Well, I know gangsters when I see them. And gangster's not a subjective expression. It's an objective condition. Do we have what it takes? We shall see. But some of us are going to go down fighting, go down swinging with style and a smile, accenting the best in you and trying to tease out the best in me. Let's do it together.
I like the video, and it's hard to hate on Cornel West. I mean, put aside politics, he's a very inspiring, affable, uplifting guy. Super smart. I mean, brilliant. Been a professor at Harvard and other places. So yeah, I mean, to me, obviously, there's judgment and I would say moral concerns about running for MPP. I can't say Cornel West is such a smart guy, but then kind of give him an out that maybe he just didn't look up MPP. You would think he kind of knows a lot of the reporting that has been done over the last year, which, you know, has been from us predominantly, that the head of MPP was under investigation for sexual harassment, that he essentially purged 5 board members who were recommending punishments for him because they found accusations credible, that the head of the organization, Nick Brana, those recommendations were going to be that he has to be stripped of management responsibilities for 6 months, that he would have to undergo anger management, sensitivity management, sexual harassment training, beyond the concerning sexual harassment or those kind of allegations there. And to be clear, Zaina Day, who worked at Status Coup for a bit, in her words, there was also assault that took place that she accused him of when she worked there, and they had a consensual relationship. There was also a lot of other really suspect things that went on, which maybe you should remind people what your experience was with MPP as a volunteer there.
So this is all so very tricky, right? Because people are starving for something that is going to be outside of what right now they're presented with. So it is not an easy task to be like, I don't know about this plan that we have going here. And I've gotten my fair share of criticism for, you know, daring to say it out loud. But, you know, 3 years ago, and it's literally been that long now, it's been over 3 years since this all went down, like almost 3 years since this all went down, when I jumped on board with MPP and really wanted to get involved in the third party movement and to try and grow a third party. It was with the full understanding that it needed to be about people, right? And Dr. West does a great job of presenting this in that video, you know, doing the whole rise up thing. but he's doing it with an organization that does not use people properly. And you can't, I can't take that seriously when I know that MPP has had multiple rounds of purging volunteers and members for deigning to speak up, when 2 sets of Black voter groups left the organization, one from purge, one from leaving because of mistreatment, when you have multiple instances of, awful memes and conversations happening in Slack that are totally misrepresentative of a group that's supposed to be for people, when it's run at the top by a person who, rather than deal with the organization and what was going on when there was an accusation happening, chose instead to remove the board members who were speaking against, who were speaking up for those who were trying to get help and get represented. When you have all of these things in play, it is very hard to cheer for anyone who decides to stand with that organization. It's important that people understand that the People's Party, one, is not a party. They don't have ballot access. They are a minor party in Florida. They are a PAC in Virginia. They literally don't have the pathway to run for a presidential campaign, because they keep getting rid of people every time there is an opportunity based on whatever's happening in that moment. When they bring people into their movement, you turn around and everyone's been purged, everyone left. This is literally either the 4th or the 5th ideation of this organization that's happening right now. And although I appreciate, again, that people want something different. I mean, I want something different, right? I left them. I now just found out that I'm an independent, because apparently Green Party in New Jersey is no longer an actual political party recognized by the state of New Jersey. So I'm now an independent. I want something different too, but you can't jump on the one thing that's different just because it's different without acknowledging all the problems that are coming along with that thing. That's how we got here, right? If you're going to say, I want to go with a third party because I want to break the duopoly, you cannot do that by working within a party that behaves the way the duopoly behaves, right? If they're working in secrecy, if they're working without transparency and democracy, if they're working against the interests of the people that are working within their party, if they're purging people, if they're not organizing on the ground and with real people who are trying to change their material conditions, where is that different from what we already have? That's not the path to difference. That's not the path to change. And I'm sure people don't like to hear it. And I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but if there's not going to be a serious change within that organization, we'll be a year and a half from now looking back at what happened when they tried to run a candidate and couldn't get their ballot access. And everyone's going to be like, well, what happened? What happened is exactly what I'm trying to prepare people for. If they don't change something, if they don't become real about pursuing this effort of actually having a party, if they don't engage with voters, if they don't talk to volunteers, if they don't stop purging people for asking questions, if they don't stop acting like bigots, they are going to have a problem.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, but I wanted to drill into one specific thing and keep the super chats coming. We'll get to them, and Renee could answer questions if you have any for her. I wanted to ask one particular thing on the race matter. I mean, obviously, Cornel West is one of the most infamous African-American scholars and, I would say political visionaries in America. And from what I could tell, when I first started reporting on Movement for a People's Party, there was a lot of complaints, shall we say, about racial insensitivity, just racism, movement for a white person's party, some people called it, which is problematic, I would say. Obviously, there are more people in People's Party than Nick Brana, but what was your experience? Because from what I remember, there wasn't a whole lot of Black volunteers.
So I came in with a really large group of volunteers who signed up because they did that online convention in late August 2020. That was really, it was very powerful. I'm not gonna lie. Like I was fully like, this is great. There was a Black Voters for People's Party circle that existed. There were multiple Black volunteers that I engaged with in various places, both, within New York State and in the national channel. There was also a lot of tone policing, a lot of the Black people are always complaining. I saw a reminder the other day. One of the leaders said that the Black folks have us by the short hairs. Like this is the kind of commentary that's happening within the Slack. The day before I woke up and found all of my privileges removed from the Slack and from the base camp and all of the organizing tools, there was a very long, unfortunate debate about whether or not white people could use the N-word. It started outside of Slack. It continued within Slack. The argument was basically that as a white person, if you're given an N-word pass, gotta say, I've never given anyone one of those. You're allowed to use it. There were other people who basically believe that since Black people use it, white people should be able to use it. And there was a huge contentious conversation that went on regarding whether or not white people should be at liberty to use the N-word. When I woke in the morning, and I did not actually participate fully in this conversation, I tried to actually call the leadership in to say, can somebody get control of what's about to happen right now? When I woke in the morning, all of my privileges were gone, along with all of the Black people who were participating in that conversation, along with the one white person who was trying to specify that no, white people should not be using the N-word and was called a race traitor for it in the Slack. And another white person who I think they deemed as like the person who started it. But all of the other white people who were staunchly debating and, fighting for their ability to use the N-word, still for the love of God, I have no idea why this is so important to people. They were allowed to stay on. The person who said there was an N-word pass that they got from somebody, whether that's true or not, we'll never know, was elevated at the next volunteer meeting. All of this was happening while there was a petition that had been written in like a 200 and something volunteers working within the organization to try and make things better. So it's really hard for me to believe that also part of this purge that happened was not because there were too many volunteers who were working together to ask the right questions. If you're asking the right questions and the people you're asking those questions and directing those questions to don't have the right answers, the best thing for them to do is be rid of you. So I saw that as, they were glad to be rid of me, even though I actually wasn't fully part of that conversation. But this was the type of thing that happened. There was some memes that were really, really inappropriate. It was not a healthy space for volunteers, not volunteers of Indigenous, not Native American, not LGBTQIA. Like there was just so much going on in that Slack, and it was not monitored properly. And it was, for me as somebody who I've participated in a lot of organizing strategies. I've been a part of a lot of different organizations. It is very hard when you are trying to be part of something to push for a change and the things that you need to be part of that change are actually happening within the organization. Right? Like I need racism to end, right? I need it to end. But racism is not going to end with an organization that thinks MLK wasn't woke, right? Like who makes jokes about things it can't happen. And so, I'm not sure what's going on. Cornel West has been part of the MPP advisory board for a long time. In his interview today with Kim Iverson, he indicated that he was, part of the founding of the People's Party. I assume he means this iteration of the People's Party that came after the advisory board was created, because the People's Party was not the People's Party. It used to be a Movement for a People's Party, which used to be People for Work and Democracy, which is actually still the the organization that it is. So I don't have an answer for what's happening. I do know that it is if you want to present yourself as a group that is trying to do the red, brown, right, left, that thing, right? Then it would actually work in your favor to put a black face at the front of it, right? To say like, look, we're bringing this person in, and I can't say that that's the intention. I'm not behind the scenes. I don't know what's going on, but I watched that interview and I found some of the statements that Dr. West made about what his plans are to be a little bit concerning as a black person, to be honest. So, I don't, black people are not the large part of the population, but we are the most, likely to be killed by police. We're the most incarcerated. We're, part of a group that for our population should not have so many representatives in the unhoused, in the under the poverty level. There are all these things that are happening, and for me, I think what's the most troublesome for me is that someone like Dr. West is giving this organization almost like credence, right? Like it's almost giving them like they know what they're doing. But people need to wait and see if they actually know what they're doing, because in 2017 they were going to have ballot access. By 2018 they were going to run somebody. In 2020 that didn't happen. In 2020 they were going to run people. That didn't happen. In 2022 they were going to run people. That didn't happen. Now we have this announcement going, and I gotta say, I'm the petty one. I checked. There's been no paperwork filed, right? Not to say that he's not going to run, but he hasn't filed anything yet. And when he files, he's not going to be able to file as People's Party because they are not a party. He's going to have to file as an independent, and he is going to have to run as an independent. And then he is going to have to pull MPP along. And I just have to wonder, like, where's the point? Like, what's the point in that? Right. And not, people are saying, oh, what about the Green? I don't know if he should run Green Party. Right. There's all kinds of issues going on there as well. The problem with this country is we live in a society, a place where we don't have real choices, right? And even just having a choice should not be enough. The bar is too low, right? Like just having a choice that's not what's already there. That shouldn't be the thing that gets people excited and we're going to do this thing, right? And I heard somebody said to me today, it's not about the party, it's about the person. But he's running as a representative of a party, right? So if you're looking at the wide body of what that party represents, and their leader, because that's what Nick Brana is. He is their chairperson. He is the name at the top of the line for the corporation that exists, for which the DBA is a People's Party, right?
And we should show, by the way, I think you tweeted this, but it seems like Nick Brana would be kind of front and center. I mean, he was with Cornel West yesterday, yesterday when this was announced, if you could show that, Colin. So that's Cornel West, I guess, doing an interview with Kim Iverson and Nick Brana in the shot, giving a thumbs up. So it's not like he's just mentioning People's Party, but like People's Party wouldn't be involved. There is, the chairman of the People's Party, who obviously a lot of people, and I'm not going to hide it, including myself, have issues with. I want to jump in, and I'm not at all minimizing everything you just said, because, I do not minimize any issues when it comes to racism or racial insensitivity. As someone myself who has actually been smeared falsely about, sexual inappropriateness or assault. I take it really seriously. I happen to find the accusations against him credible based on everything I've looked into and I know. But based on my own reporting, totally separate from sexual harassment or assault accusations. To me, when you toss away all of this and you just look at this from a strategic point of view, if Cornel West is going to run third party, which I have no issue with, you don't want it to be a setback for the left, because obviously there's a big portion of the left now that is third party or nothing and will not vote Democrat. So me personally, I don't have like that absolutist view. Like, I'll vote in a Democratic primary. If a candidate I like chooses to run as a Democrat, I'm not going to cancel them because they're running as a Democrat. However, I'm not against a third party run, but I want the third party run to actually accomplish something. Maybe get to that 5% for more federal funding. Do better than Jill Stein. Actually threaten the Democratic Party to the point that, oh shit, that this third party candidate might pull enough votes away from Biden that the Democratic Party is going to have to give us something, or they're going to lose because there's enough votes getting peeled away by the third party vote. We'll show the clips in a little bit, but that was the main coverage of Cornel West's nomination announcement, the fact that this might pull away votes from Biden and Democrats are concerned. To me, putting aside all the moral questions about MPP, I think it's a bad choice because I've covered enough campaigns to know a lot of times you could have an amazing candidate with really shitty campaigns surrounding him or her. Or you could have a shitty candidate with good campaign staff, but the candidate won't listen. So Bernie, for example, I thought was a great candidate who wouldn't listen to his campaign, who told him, go punch Biden in the face. He wouldn't listen. And we've already talked about that over and over. So it wasn't necessarily the campaign that was wrong. The candidate himself made poor choices. There have been candidates I've covered where they're lacking, but they have good people around them. Or they're good and they have bad people around them. From what I could tell, Cornel West is a really, really strong candidate. I don't know if he would win the presidency because of all the obstacles we and our audience know about. The rigging. I mean, let's not pretend that if you just run for third party, there's no rigging that goes on. Because all these people that are like, we're done with the Democrats' third party, they don't seem to address the issue of they're going to rig it just as much against the third party candidate who's actually a threat than they would against a candidate running in the Democratic Party. Lawsuits, try to get them off the ballot, et cetera, et cetera. To me, from everything I could tell about MPP, Cornel West would basically have no support infrastructure around him. Nick Brana, I don't think this has been discussed much. I have heard this directly from people on Bernie's campaign. Nick Brana exaggerated his role on Bernie 2016. When I say exaggerated, I mean, he kind of spun it. He was not like a national director running organizing. And he took that exaggeration and spun it into Draft Bernie and then morphed it into a movement for a People's Party. He, as far as I know, he had a paid role for a short time in the Bernie campaign, and then that was no longer paid. This was coming to me from multiple people in Bernie's campaign. I don't know why they never went forward with it publicly, but let's just say an exaggeration. From what I could tell from people that I've spoke to, Nick Brana can't organize his way out of a paper bag, much less a presidential campaign. I have seen the events I've covered of MPP, not a presidential campaign, just like a protest outside AOC's office, was a fucking shit show. I mean, the best success, I guess you could say, was this Rage Against the War protest, which was in partnership with some libertarian group. And that was widely exaggerated. And it wasn't, to me, the most impressive crowd, considering the promotion. So to me, if Cornel West is going to run for third party, I want the campaign to do well. I want it to at least get past 5%, maybe even hover. I mean, Ross Perot back in the day got 20%. Why can't Cornel West have one compete for some of the best third party, whether it's independent, green numbers that we've ever seen, and kind of change the way we think about it? But from what I could tell, Cornel West his strengths would be his oratory, his policies, which I think is the best on foreign policy, definitely police brutality, imperialism, domestic policy. But he can't do everything himself. And I don't see evidence that there is an infrastructure, strong leadership, any organizational skills. I mean, it's not just you, Renee. I spoke with plenty of people there who said it is a shit show and a vanity project. So for that reason, besides the moral questions of whether he should be lending credibility to this group, I just see this as going to be a disaster that further weakens him. I mean, his legacy to me is protected, period, but almost embarrasses him because he doesn't have the proper support infrastructure, staff, unless I am wildly surprised here and they put in people that actually have political campaign experience, organizing experience. But as of now, I don't see that. I see Nick Brana, a lot of his cultist followers that have stood by him for whatever reason. And to me, that's the biggest danger here. If you're running for president, you need infrastructure. You need experienced campaign people. You need people that know in terms of vendors, advanced staff for events, digital organizing, fundraising, all those things. There's zero evidence MPP has any of that stuff. I also find it problematic if you're running a presidential campaign with an organization that the top two figures are a father and son. And they have access. They, as far as I know, are the only people with access to the financial books. Highly questionable. So whether he ran as an independent or a Green Party, also, I don't know how the Green Party has plenty of problems, but they have elected officials on the local level. They have people who have won elections. They've never ran a candidate on any level, MPP, much less one. So these are the actual logistical and just nuts and bolts of competing issues here, well beyond the accusations against him. And I think that's a big deal because I don't want Cornel West to be embarrassed to the point where he has trouble putting on events, because you could go on Joe Rogan, you could go on these shows, you could go viral, you could trend. That's not the same thing as getting on the ballots. That's not the same thing as butts in the seat for physical events. That's not the same thing for digital organizing, getting vendors, et cetera, getting endorsements from other organizations. So, I mean, those are my thoughts as far as the impracticality of this group that has proved nothing. I wouldn't be fine with it, but I would be criticizing it a lot less if it was MPP's first congressional candidate or Senate candidate. A presidential candidate, it seems like a big leap. And Nick Brana has never explained how you're going to get ballot access. Not years ago when he still had some credibility before people realized who he is. And I don't see any explanation for how they're going to get ballot access now. So your thoughts?
So this was one of the big issues that we had when we were trying to organize within the state of New York. Was there was nothing put in place to help with that organizing, right? They kept saying, oh, we're working on these documents, we're working on bylaws, we're working on hub practices, we're working on, having like a system put together so that people know how to engage with other voters, how to bring other people into the party, how to participate in meetings, those types of things. None of that really worked out. They did at some point come up with, it was like a procedural document for running hubs and how to get those things going. But it was very messy and didn't actually provide a whole lot of information that was going to be useful at that time. Part of my issue, and it's something that I've said over and over again, is if you are really going to do something that is going to change the status of this country, you have to have people on the ground who are willing to do the work, right? You have to have people all over the country who are organizing for you, who are working for you, who are getting those signatures, who are doing all of those things. Could MPP have a secret cove of, hundreds of thousands of people who are going to do this work to make sure that, these things fall into place? I guess it's possible. It's pretty hard to do when you keep kicking people out every time they ask questions. It's pretty hard to do when you overspend and you spend more money than you're bringing in donations, it's pretty hard.
$20,000, by the way, they spent of donor money, small dollar donors, for a logo they never ended up using.
Right. It's pretty hard to do when your father is running your finances and he's not an accountant. And when people ask, can you be a little more clear about where the money is going? Let's be a little more transparent so that we cannot act like the duopoly. And that gets mocked, right? So all of the things that you brought up are all things that people should be questioning. I I believe, and this is just my own theory, that Nick believes that with a strong enough person running for president, that he will be able to parlay that into getting ballot access in multiple states. And then that will allow him to become this party that he has been trying to become now for, we're going on 7 years, I think, that they've been trying to do this. So like, could it work? Is Dr. West popular enough to do that? Maybe possible, right? Anything's possible. But what happens when you actually have to have people on the ground, right? Like, you get your 10,000 signatures, you're on the ballot. How do you get the word out, right? I think this theory a little bit of the taking votes from the Dems might be a little overstated. A lot of people in these circles, they don't like Democrats, right? They're already sick of it. They already want something different. They already want to vote for somebody who's not part of duopoly. I think you'd be surprised at how many voters just don't vote anymore. And maybe they'll bring some voters out who hadn't, initially intended to go to the polls. That's possible. What I think the bigger thing is that I think people are missing is that MPP has walked away from the left publicly, right? They stated they're no longer progressives. They want to work with the right, right? Like, this is not a progressive party anymore, per Nick Brana. Like, this is not what they want to do anymore. They're tired of the woke.
They called him a populist party.
Right. They're tired of the woke mob mentality. Would be attacked by the woke mob. Like, they're not about all this. Like, Dr. West may be saying all of these things, but he is representing a party that has said very clearly that they're no longer about these things. They're very much the, all lives matter party, right? The big tent party. There's no tent big enough that is going to give enough room for me to stand next to my oppressor. So good luck with that, right? Like, it's just not going to happen. So again, I understand that people want something different. And I know people are really not happy with me, right? I said it very clearly on my Twitter. I don't have a huge following, which sometimes makes me wonder why people care what I say anyway. But, I'm disappointed. And the reason I'm disappointed is because if the People's Party is still the thing that I knew them to be when I got booted out, when I had to circle back to the next set of Black people who had to leave because of the mistreatment, when I had to circle back again because there was accusations of sexual harassment that resulted in people being removed from the party, like, all of those times that I had to circle back, it was always because the same people were in charge. So the reason I'm disappointed is because if he is signing on to an organization that is going to continue to misuse its power, misuse its funding, and mistreat the people, what is he signing on to? What is he promoting? What is he putting his name on? I don't get it, right? I don't have any understanding of it. And they really don't have an infrastructure in place. They do not have the capability to run a presidential campaign. The last time I checked, there were like 1,500 people in their Slack. Like, where are we going with this? Well, and it's always been the same problem.
I also think that, and I understand the devil's advocate position. I've seen some people in the chat. Well, it's not about the party. It's about Cornel, and he has the voice and the policies that are unique and can inspire people and almost overcome the things we're talking about. The problem is, maybe that's possible on a lower level when you're running for like a local election or a congressional race. But when you're running for president, I mean, you could ask anyone that's ever worked on a presidential campaign. You can't do it just based off of the candidates and the candidates' charisma or policies. I mean, Bernie, a lot of what made Bernie in 2016 were the rallies. I know because I covered it. You know how much goes into one rally, much less organizing, 3 in a day? That's what they call advanced staff. You have people on campaigns that are not paid enough, and they all should be unionized, that are working 100-hour weeks. And we're not just talking campaign managers. We're talking low levels. You need so much. And that's when you're running in the two-party duopoly. You probably need a lot more on the third party, because then you're dealing with a media blackout.
Right. And
so you're going to need people.
This is why the Green Party has so many problems, right? Is because everything is working against them being able to do that thing, right? And they have people. They have hundreds of people in local seats. They actually have state parties set up. They have all this stuff. And it doesn't work, right? And listen, this is not me. It's not a condemn. Like, I want a third party to work, because God knows something's got to happen, right? But it doesn't work with the people who at least have a little bit put together. They don't have anything put together. So when people say it's about Cornel West cannot run and talk to 300 million people by himself. It's not possible. It is June of 2023. He needs people. He needs a setup. He needs states to have their organizational stuff together. Now, again, as I've said, it is possible that they've been working all of this on, working in the background. Maybe they have some infrastructures going. Maybe that's what is happening. Maybe they're prepared. But it's really hard for me to believe that that's going to be the case, given what I know about the people who are there.
I could tell you, just browsing their expenditures of the last quarter, I was looking at their for filings. It looks like they have, I could be wrong, but it looks like they have the same dipshit lawyer that's been advising them for this whole time, as volunteers have been purged, and 2 other law firms I saw. We're not even getting to the point. You're probably going to need an army of lawyers for when both Democrat or Republicans, depending on which ones feel more threatened that you're going to peel off votes, when they start challenging you state by state to get you off the ballot. Say what you want about the Green Party, and I will tell you, the Green Party, who I would, if anyone's wondering what's your position, I would say run as a Green. Not because the Green Party doesn't have corruption problems, not because the Green Party doesn't have issues, but because, say what you want, Jill Stein's campaign got on 48 ballots in 2016. Now, part of that was, I don't think the Democrats felt that threatened by her. The data, by the way, to you Hillary stands, if there are any, Jill Stein's, the vote she got would have not made the difference for Hillary Clinton to win. It's just data. However, she got on 48 ballots. That, more than anything, you cannot compete if you're not on as many state ballots as possible. And that campaign, with all due respect, because I'm a fan of Jill Stein, was a shit show. When I was at the Young Turks, when I finally convinced Jank to send me out and cover Jill Stein, I covered her for about a week. One event, she flew to the wrong city in Ohio, and she ended up being 2.5 hours late at a college. Like, that's a pretty big fuck up for a campaign. And that was the Green Party, which actually had somewhat of an infrastructure and actually had, electoral victories on a local level. So besides all the concerning questions, the accusations, sexual, financial, I just see, I don't see an infrastructure to support this person, who I think is a visionary, when you have the Green Party or independent. So to me, there are bigger things than Nick Brana. I think Cornel West is bigger than Nick Brana. I personally, people could do what they want. It's a non-starter for me based on what I know about this party. But for Cornel West, I can't give him the benefit of the doubt, because if he didn't look into it, that's his first major decision as a presidential candidate. And that's really poor judgment if you didn't look into all the accusations.
I got it.
Well, I would have to think he did.
Yeah, I gotta say, there were too many people who were sending him information. I know I, for one, actually ended up with a direct link to his secretary. I was told that he got all of the information. We never got a response. There were organizers who stayed after that big purge and after the petition was written. When that advisory council was still a thing, they attempted to communicate with him. They were essentially told that Dr. West believed it was not, I can't remember exactly what the word was, but essentially it wasn't going to be beneficial for him to have a conversation with them. So it was a choice by him, in my opinion, to not be fully made aware of all the things that were presented to him. Whether he ever took the time to read that stuff or have those conversations, I don't know. But choosing ignorance is not an excuse, right? Like, if you're presented with information, you can take the information, take it in, and you can decide to do whatever you want with that information. But you can't, pretend like you weren't made aware just because you chose not to receive what was provided to you.
And the last thing I'll say about this, and this is coming from a place of somebody who, I mean, frankly, if he was running in the Democratic primary, I would vote for him. And I like Marianne Williamson, but I don't equate her with him in terms of the whole package. And I think he's better on foreign policy than her. Obviously, that we wouldn't have to worry about that because he's running as third party. But to me, in this current political dynamic, Renee, I think if any cycle there was a legitimate chance for a third party candidate to actually compete, I don't know about win, but actually compete, this is it. You got a president who's tripping over himself, literally, who reports are they don't want to send him out before 10 a.m. or after 4 p.m. Trump might be indicted for a second time by the week's end or next week, reports are. Two very unpopular candidates. And then if Trump was indicted, he might still win the nomination, but you might have people finally saying, you know what, we're open to somebody else. And that somebody else, you need an inspirational person. You need somebody who also can mix inspiration with that real talk, which I think Marianne Williamson has him bringing. I think Cornel West will call him corrupt because he has before. I think he will go after capitalism itself because he has before. AIPAC and the Jewish lobby will certainly go after him because he's the strongest on Palestine of any potential candidate, but that might galvanize a whole lot of new voters. So I think Cornel West, if he actually pivots right now, whether just saying I'm running independent or green or something else, could compete. I'm not going to lie to people and say I think he has a shot to win, because right now I think it would be very hard for any third party candidate to win. But competing as a third party candidate would certainly be a step in the right direction. Getting beyond 5%, maybe even getting 10, 15% would be a massive, massive momentum shift to future elections. So I think, hopefully he's paying attention, because honestly, you got to remember, and you know this, Renee, MPP was basically openly saying we're just going to be a party that mimics Jimmy Dore, Jackson Hinkle, and other podcasters we like, their messaging. That's not an organization that's serious or has an infrastructure.
And people should remember, it hasn't been that long since they were selling Door 24 shirts, right? Like, they're kind of going with whatever thing they think is gonna work as far as name recognition, right? And I get it, and I understand that this could be, and it could be just like you said, because he is dynamic and because he is on the right side of a lot of things, he could reach people in a way that many candidates would not have reached people. But that said, how is that going to work if you don't have people on the ground across the country willing to do the work? People don't understand that when Bernie decided he was going to run, he had been in politics for decades. That was not that swell for Bernie didn't happen out of nowhere, right? Like, it wasn't like, it may have seemed to people like it was out of nowhere, but the man has been in politics for decades. So he had a lot of the things that were in place that he needed to have in place already in order for him to push forward with this movement. I just don't see how it's possible with an organization that won't even, that, like, do you know how many people the People Party has blocked on Twitter? Like, you're running a political campaign and people can't read your tweets because you're afraid that they're gonna criticize you and call you out on stuff. Like, this is not real. Like, this is not real life, right? And my understanding is Green Party did the same thing to some people. Like, I don't understand what world we're living in where every method that is available to people in order to reach the masses, to reach the people, to talk to voters, not just when it's in a cycle, right? All of those opportunities are lost because people are so busy trying to do the thing that's going to get them on TV, that's going to get the most clicks, that's going to get the most likes, all these things. Like, people can't eat. People don't have roofs. People can't buy groceries. People can't put gas in their car. People are struggling right now, right? And where is it going to go if you don't have a real plan? And I just, look, could they have a plan? Absolutely, they could have a plan. But what I know of that crew, there's no plan. I have no faith. But listen, my crystal ball broke this morning. I could
Well,
be wrong.
I think you made an important point. I mean, maybe 2 months ago, 3 months ago, their plan was nonstop social media trolling and, well, not trolling, but pushing Jimmy Dore to run. So as of a few months ago, their plan that they were pushing hard, and there was some discrepancy because Nick Brana claimed that Jimmy Dore told him he had decided that he was going to run for president, but then some people, friends of Jimmy, I think it was Aaron Mate, said that's not true. So, like, not so long ago, their plan was Jimmy Dore, and it seems like that shifted to let's convince Cornel West. I know you got to go. I just want to read a few super chats that are either asking you a question or directed towards you about this. Christina 999, thank you. Hey, Jordan, does your guest believe that MPP could change internally with Cornel West running on their ticket?
This is such a hard question because at the core of this organization is Nick Brana, who, in all of my experience, has no interest in letting go of the power of being at the center of this circle. So I tweeted out multiple times, if the core group is gone and their associations with neo-Nazis and racists and bigots are gone, and Cornel West is starting up a whole new thing, I'd be more likely to kind of just sit back and not complain so much and see how things go. And, listen, I'm not saying that if all the things align that I have an interest in, because there are a lot of things that I agree with Dr. West on, right? Like, there are a ton of policies that when I read them and when I hear him speak, I'm like, right on, brother, let's go, let's go, let's go. This is not me saying that Dr. West sucks and Dr. West doesn't know what he's doing and all these things. This is me saying that if we are going to start a political movement that is actually going to break duopoly, you have to do it with an organization that is allowing people to be part of the party. You cannot do it while you are kicking people out for asking questions and denying people the ability to participate in the process because you don't like what they have to say. That is not how this is going to work, because the reason people are so disengaged with the whole electoral process to begin with is because they feel like their words don't matter. They feel like nobody cares about what they think unless it's time for them to fill in something on a bubble. People don't want that anymore. They want people who give a shit about them when it's not just an electoral cycle. And once again, here we are running into an electoral cycle with all these people deciding that they're going to run for president. And here comes MPP with this new person candidate because they think that's going to be the way to go to catapult them into being an actual political party. And that's not, it has to start with people. And I just don't know how to say it enough. Like, it has to start with people. And if it's not starting with people, if it's starting with one person and you're hoping that one person is going to be the thing that's going to catapult you, where are the people that you need to support that catapult from happening? Like, where are they? Where are they coming from?
And I would also piggyback off of that and distill it into, I think a lot of people learned not to fall into the hero worship. And just with Bernie in particular, Bernie will be enough. He'll somehow be enough. You need a lot more than one candidate or one group of Congress people. This is a rotten system. It's a corrupt system. Definitely. AK Woman, $1.99, Direct Democracy Now. Agree. Christina, another $9.99. I knew Nick was full of it when he announced MPP on the Jimmy Dore Show in December 2019. He was always very glib and superficial, typical narcissist. Based on what I've seen and reported, I would also say if your group is People's Party, you have to evaluate the structure, because People is not a board of directors run by a father-son combo with the rest of them basically being yes men and women for the father and the son, to the point that when there were other board members that wanted to have a meeting and some of them wanted Nick, we're going to call for Nick to step down, half the board, two of that half is five in this case, are the father and son. So I don't really know how you have a People's Party if it's basically at the top, so top down, a father and son. I mean, that just objectively on its face doesn't make a lot of sense. Peace Walker, $5. If it's not about the party but about the candidate, then why write off a candidate running as a Democrat?
I'd like to state for the record that I mean, I'm not a Democrat, so I can't vote in primaries, but I don't do that. I just happen to not like anybody who's running for the Democrats. Like, part of the problem, and I think part of the reason that people write off Democratic candidates is because the Democrats suck, right? Like, part of the reason we are in so much turmoil is because their whole goal is to just go along with what the Republicans want and pretend like they're actually doing something while getting absolutely nothing done. So when that is what people automatically say, I'm not doing it. They're running Democrat. I don't want to be bothered. I'm not, I don't necessarily disagree with this question. Like, people shouldn't write off anybody without understanding their policies and what what they're bringing to the table. But they also have to look at who's supporting them and who's behind them. And the Democrats are rotten to the core. So if you're running for a Democratic seat as their person who's going to run for president, the group that you have behind you is rotten to the core. How can anyone trust that you're going to do anything that you need to do for the people? So one must say, if this is how people feel about Democrats, then they should be asking about People's Party.
I think it's a great point, because Robert's pointing out the contradiction in that. How do you say ignore the party? The candidate is enough, but people ruled out Nina Turner because she was running as a Democrat. Well, I don't think there's much daylight politically between Cornel West and Nina Turner on policy, at least. Cornel went and campaigned for her. I know they're good personal friends, but people were like, nope, not getting involved because she's running as a Democrat. But people would ignore that this party has not, this organization, because it's not a party, has not gotten a candidate on a ballot, never won anything, has no infrastructure, has basically gaslit everyone. When volunteers were purged, they said, no, those are infiltrators. I mean, this is kind of amateur hour and a laughing stock. So yeah, I think that's a good point. Tony D, $2. Very disappointed in Dr. West, one of my favorites. I love Cornel West. I've interviewed him a couple times. I think he's great. So I'm hoping that maybe as a smart person and maybe someone who's genuinely cares what people think and, how the masses feel, maybe he will take, because most of the response I saw was critical, not of him, but of his decision to run MPP. So maybe he'll take it in stride and not want the distraction and want to focus on the issues and just drop the MPP part.
It's important to point out, he cannot run as People's Party. He can announce that all he wants and he can say everything that he wants, but they do not have ballot access across the country. They are not a political party that has access in any state on a major way. Even in Florida, last check, it was a minor. They tried in California. They didn't get enough people, so their forms got thrown out. In Virginia, you're only allowed to be a Republican or a Democrat. You can only be a PAC if you're not one of those two parties in the state of Virginia. So there are a bunch of places where they can try to say that they have some kind of access, but it's always going to be very, very murky. So it's important for people to understand that if Cornel West is running, he is going to have to run as an independent. And he's just going to have to say, he's under the People's Party banner, you know, and he can couch it that way, but he's going to have to run as an independent because they do not have ballot access and they cannot get ballot access in time. All they can get is a candidate on the ballot in multiple states, and he can say that he's running for People's Party, but it will not be a People's Party ballot line.
Arlene, $20. Thanks, Arlene. Love you, Jordan, but please concentrate on Dr. West. He's pretty damn capable. Yeah, I mean, I'll just reiterate the same point, and I think Renee agrees. It's not about whether he's capable or not. You can't be the candidate and the campaign at the same time. So Cornel West can be very capable at maybe convincing, you know, traditionally right-wingers to give him a look based on a lot of, you know, there are conservatives who are more isolationist, maybe would be receptive to the anti-war message. There are some conservatives that deem themselves anti-establishment, maybe have criticisms of capitalism. I think there are some more centrist or traditional liberal people that might be attracted to his religious. He does invoke religion, and so I'm not saying he's like a hardcore religious person, but he does invoke some religious tenets and things like that, and that's attractive.
I mean, he's working at a seminary right now, Jordan.
Okay, yes, so you're right. That is attractive to some people in terms of some people that are spiritual or religious. So he's very capable. But the problem is Cornel West can't set up his events too. Cornel West can't negotiate, with courts for ballot access. Cornel West can't simultaneously come up with his own media plan to avoid immediate.
And he cannot get the however many thousands of signatures that he needs in every single state in order to be on the ballot. There's a lot of work that has to go into this, and there is not a whole lot of time. And if they do not have a plan, this is not going to work. This is not really my issue with Cornel West. Is I want people that I respect to do better. That's my issue with Cornel West. And I do not think siding with this group of people is doing better for anybody. But at the same time, you have to have a plan. I can't just wake up tomorrow and say, I'm going to run for president and think it's going to happen, like without a plan and an infrastructure and people. And it's not doable.
Can I just venture to guess, and some people might not like this, but I'm just going to say it. I would venture to guess based on the announcement that there's not a strong plan in place. No disrespect. I like Chris Hedges. It was announced on Chris Hedges' Substack. Then a video on Cornel West Twitter, which did get around. My guess is they probably already have a spot on Joe Rogan booked, which is obviously a big deal for anyone, whether you're running for politics or not, just based on the audience. But in terms of a rollout, I don't know. I didn't find it overly impressive. No disrespect to Russell Brand or Kim Iverson, but I don't know. I mean, there are bigger audiences that I would have.
I mean, and listen, there was a lot of press. There was a lot of press. It was a lot of newspapers announcing it. They said it in the New York Times. I mean, there was a lot of press. But at the same time, and I see.
But when you think of a presidential announcement, particularly third party, you need more than a couple write-ups in major papers.
I agree. I want people to understand again. If you are going to go into this and you are going to support this thing because you think it's going to be the pathway to change, you need to go into it understanding the history of this group, the history of the organization, and the history of the leadership of this organization, so that when you go into it, you go in with your eyes wide open. I don't want to be ever in a position where I am aware that there are bad things that can happen to good people and I don't say something. That experience with MPP for me was traumatizing. I had a lot of meetings to follow up. It was not fun for me. Every time somebody calls me to say, can you do an interview? Can you come on? Can you do this thing? I get slammed. People don't like it. I'm a Dem. I'm a COINTELPRO. I'm an infiltrator. Like all this bullshit because people are mad that I'm just speaking my mind. I just want people to understand that there is a process for this. There is a whole hell of a lot of things that have to be done if you're going to put somebody in that presidential seat. And you can't go into this process without having some sense or plan or people or money or a whole lot of things that need to be in place. And if people just go in and say, well, he's great, I like his ideas. There's a lot of people who have great ideas, right? Like that's not going to be enough, especially not in a place that actively works against people having a voice. Our government actively works against people having a voice. So there has to be a better thing in place in order for this to happen. And if you're siding with people who for 7 years have not gotten one thing done that they had on their list of things that they were striving to do, you cannot go into it and say, oh, well, they're going to do it this time. Why? Like, why would you just go into it and assume that there's something that's in place now that hasn't been in place? Do it if you want. You want to volunteer? Go for it. You want to jump on, you want to sign up for the emails, you want to, be in know, you want to start the organizing, you want to get involved in your state because you feel like this is the thing you want to do. I applaud that. Go for it, because people are going to need some help if they want anybody real in there. But you have to go in there understanding that you're going into an organization that has already failed multiple times at achieving any of the goals that they have set forth. Period. Point blank, period. That is fact. So you can be mad at me for that fact, or you can acknowledge that that is the fact of the situation and move forward knowing that that's the fact and understanding that you might have a bigger battle on your hands than just that Cornel West is really smart and a great person and he has great policy.
And the last thing I'll say, two things. One, and this is brought up by Zaina in the chat. Bottom line, I mean, it's the People's Party, but don't seem like they had a primary. Not very democratic. I love Cornel West, but I mean, if you are advocating for more democracy and you're saying you're a political party, you would think you'd have a primary, which obviously we think Cornel West would win. The other thing is, if you think the media tarred and feathered Bernie, you better have a really crack, experienced communications team around Cornel West, a rapid response team, because they're going to go back to some shit he has said, some of it that might actually be controversial. And if your rapid communications response team is Nick Brana, good luck. Because that's something, Arlene and others, you can't just rely on the candidate to be the response team. You need experienced people, and Zaina, who obviously, and just full disclosure, I reached out to Zaina on Sunday before Cornel West or anybody knew about this to ask if she wanted to come on Monday. Then this announcement came and I messaged her because clearly, she has made accusations against MPP Nick Brana, sexual harassment, sexual assault, among other things. And I said, it's okay if you don't want to come on. I didn't know that this was going to happen when I asked you the day before to come on. And, she didn't want to. And I think she was right, because the focus shouldn't be on that. It should be on the party as a whole. Right. But Zaina, who worked here for a short time, and, we're going to have on again soon. She knows this group too. And she knows Nick Brana too. And she's in the chat. I mean, I'll say this right here. $5 from Zaina. There's a difference between DNC running a candidate and them running just as a Dem. Same with this People's Party running this campaign with no primary. So, yeah, my final thing on this is I think Cornel West is really, I think he's got a little Bernie in him in terms of just that different thing that not only excites people, but almost inspires people, makes people feel there is hope, makes people feel maybe it's not all forgone, that we can't change things. And you need that in these terrible fucking times. But don't tie your hand behind don't start with one hand tied behind your back, because you're already in an uphill climb as a third party candidate. Anything else, Renee, before we go?
No, yeah. And sorry, we ended up talking about this the whole time. I was up at like 1 o'clock in the morning, could not believe that there was still people commenting down in Atlanta trying to get these people to not vote for that fucking cop city. I'm so sick of people speaking and trying to defend the things that their representatives are supposed to support, because that is what their people want them to do, and then doing the exact opposite. I've never seen anything like it. The outpouring of that community against Cop City, for them to still go ahead and vote yes on that, man, and to push that funding through, even with all the murkiness that's happening. That's something that people need to pay attention to, because there's a Cop City coming to New Jersey. Don't know if you know that. It's part of the budget that's already slated for next year.
And Pittsburgh.
and Pittsburgh, and I think there's actually one that's already built in Illinois that's just not as big as the one that's in Atlanta. This is what the move is going to be, and this is part of why the politics is so important for people to understand. Things like Cop City are being built because they are trying to strategize to make sure that if there is actually a people-based revolution, they have the means to shut it down, right? Cops are not here to help us. Cops are in place to make sure that the people who have the property and the money and the power keep those things. So all of these things that are being set up and built, they're being set up and built to make sure that they can shut down any opportunity that people have to actually revolutionize and become something that's going to turn over what's happening now in this country. That's why Cop City is being built. That's why everybody who shouldn't be behind it is being either very, very quiet or silently like supporting it. We have to be very, very careful about, this hero worship and the cult mentality and, not understanding how important it is to pay attention to what is happening amongst the people in your community and within your life. Like, we got to wake up. But I do have to go. I went over, and I think I'm getting yelled at.
Thanks for doing this last minute. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, Jordan.
Don't go anywhere because we're about to shift to Cop City. As you know, and keep smashing that like button. I'll read the rest of the super chats at the end. As you know, we went live yesterday, I think for almost 4 hours during the hearing. It was a long marathon. I think it went on for 13, 14 hours, late into the night, where 350 people from Atlanta gave their public comments. I believe it was overwhelming. I'm talking like 95, 96% of the people that spoke were against the funding of Cop City, which shockingly, the Atlanta City Council in an 11-4 vote voted to fund it, brazenly ignoring the will of their constituents. So to be clear, there is no democracy in Atlanta or the rest of America when you are elected representatives, but you are so clearly ignoring your constituents. That's not just about Atlanta. This is happening all across the country, and it's been happening as the country and the corruption has cemented over the years. In 2014, remember, Princeton or Stanford gave a study. They said America is an oligarchy, not a democracy, for this exact reason. I want to show you some of the highlights, some of the most powerful public comments made by Stop Cop City protesters. By the way, there were well over across the day, over 1,000 protesters outside the Atlanta City Chambers. It was the biggest turnout ever for any issue in the city of Atlanta's history in city council, with protesters showing up throughout the day. There were people, dropping in pizzas for the protesters that stayed all day. There was daycare for the children for protesters that had to bring their kids. So there was daycare resources. So it was a real beautiful movement type of thing, even though obviously the vote didn't go the way people wanted. But I wasn't there, but from the video and the reports, it was really a beautiful coming together of protesters from across the board. I mean, black, white, old, young. Let's play some of those clips I sent you, Colin.
I live in Southwest Atlanta in District 10 with my wife and daughter. Both my wife and I grew up here. Our families call Atlanta home, and we are deeply rooted and invested in this city and its future. I've never spoken at council before, but I've been so disturbed by how the city has ignored the voices of its constituents, lied about how much money is going to this facility, violently suppressed its own residents for protesting and organizing to stop the destruction of Weelaunee Forest, just so that the police can build a new training center that we don't need, that we don't want. I knew I had to be here today. I have a little girl. She's about to turn 2. She's the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. I never knew I could love someone so much. On our way to daycare in the morning, we sing songs as I try to avoid the potholes that have been there for years. I drive by neighbors waiting at bus stops with no benches, no shelters from the rain. We see unhoused neighbors and community members sleeping under makeshift shelters. And we see cop cars cruising our neighborhood all day, every day. I've been harassed on more than one occasion by the cops in my neighborhood. They make me feel the opposite of safe. Spending $60 million taxpayer dollars on a new police police training facility is the most heartbreaking, reckless, and quite frankly, anti-black thing this city has ever proposed in my lifetime. I cannot believe I'm standing here pleading for you to not spend the tax dollars of a black city to tear down a forest in a black neighborhood, to increase the policing and caging of more and more black people, all this in a city with black leadership. I'm tired of it. Just think of what $60 million can do to care, educate, house, and nurture the people of the city, the children of the city. Say no to Cop City. Thank you.
Next up.
It's actually going to be closer to $70 million of taxpayer money. And this is actually taxpayer money because cities and states don't print money like the Federal Reserve does on the federal level. So the amount of money they're spending, not for like, you know, to train police cadets in Atlanta. You know, you always get the fear mongering and the propaganda from these political candidates. Oh, it's all out of state money. All the donations are coming from out of state, or all the protesters are coming from out of state. This is mostly, you know, trainees coming from out of state to come to Atlanta to basically train in a militarized police compound in the woods. It's, by the way, not just 85 acres. There's reports it could be as big as 200 acres. They're dumping it on top of a predominantly black neighborhood that does not have representation on this city council because it's DeKalb County and this is the city council. Yet they all voted 11-4 for this monstrosity because they're all bought off by the police foundation and the corporations that are funding this. And there will be, in my opinion, implications in the 2024 election in terms of Cop City, which I'll share after these next two clips. Let's play the next clip.
We can agree that the use of domestic terrorism charges on peaceful protesters is horrifically excessive. It seems we can agree that the murder of Tortuguita should not have happened, that the 57 bullets that ripped their body apart should never have been fired. I'm sure we can agree that the SWAT raid of the teardown house and arrest of the 3 Solidarity Fund organizers is questionable at the very best, although I would without a doubt label it as an attempt at fascism. If these things trouble you as deeply as you claim, why do you wish to build a massive playground for the people doing them? What do you think they will be training for? They've shown you quite clearly again and again. You cannot train the police not to repress activists. That's what they exist to do. It's time to stand on your words and help ensure Tortuguita never happens again.
So he's referring to Tortuguita, who was the environmental protester who was assassinated by Georgia police, who then lied about it. They claimed that they were firing at the police, and that's why police had to respond in self-defense. The Georgia autopsy showed that they were struck with dozens of bullets. An independent autopsy found that they had their hands in an upward position. And there was video showing that police were caught saying, "I think you shot your man." Meaning the police officer that was struck wasn't struck by Tortuguita, was struck by friendly fire from the police. All because Tortuguita did not come out right away when the police commanded them to come out of a tent. 57 times, thank you. Shot at 57 times. As Stephen Donziger has said, this is the first time an environmental protester has been killed in America. Standing Rock was brutal, and people almost died, but they killed this young person. Not to mention the fact that they are literally killing, I don't think we have a democracy, but the idea of democracy, they are charging everybody and their mother with domestic terrorism, nonviolent, unarmed protesters there for running from police, for having flares on them, for just absurd bullshit, for resisting police. Domestic terrorism. They have held some protesters for months in prison. And the only type of fascism we should be worried about is the rise of neo-Nazis in America. Yeah, we should be worried about that. We should be worried about the violent conspiracy movements, the rise of domestic terrors, white supremacy. This is fascism too. It's just a different shade. It's concerning, and it's being pushed by a Democratic mayor, a Democratic city council. You got 2 Democratic senators that the DNC, that Biden said, we got to do everything we can to elect John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock so we could take the Senate in 2020 and save democracy. They've basically been quiet as a mouse. Warnock actually, for the first time, spoke out against this. Same thing with Ossoff. And it was basically pre-approved, probably written by a consultant to check the box that they've said something, kind of, sort of, that they're concerned about the heavy-handed actions by the police without actually saying so. And their statements actually came out not after an environmental protester, Tortuguita, was assassinated by the police. They came out after the police went in a SWAT team raid of organizers of the Atlanta Bail Fund. They literally went after charging organizers of the Atlanta Bail Fund, which has been helping to fund people's bail that are being wrongly arrested and charged with domestic terrorism. No, we're not talking about like the old Soviet Union here. We're not talking about China. We're not talking about a corrupt country. Well, we are. But, you know, the idea of a corrupt third world strongman country, talking about the United Corporations of America, this is happening. Colin, do we have that other clip?
I only see 2 clips in the doc.
Hold on. Yeah, you're right. Also, let's show that tweet moments before Atlanta City Council vote. So this is moments before the Atlanta City Council voted against the will of the public. Look at that image. Guess it was shot by Unicorn Riot. Shout out to them. I mean, you can't make that up. As the Atlanta City Council, 11 yes to 4 no, votes against the will of the public to fund a militarized police compound. Keep it up. A heavy-handed force of militarized-looking police come to protect the aristocracy from the proletariat. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I didn't watch the whole hearing. But from what I could tell, from what I did watch, and I watched about 4 to 5 hours, I did not see one of these congressmen explain their vote or give a credible reason why they were approving funding for this compound. Not to mention, besides the concerns about why do we need a massive, potentially 200-acre militarized police compound, they're tearing down one of the some of the last remaining publicly protected forests in Atlanta to do this. This is indigenous land that they're doing it. This area used to have slaves on this land. So there's environmental, racial. As I said, they're going to be building this right next to a 75% black neighborhood. So these residents are going to have to listen to gun target practice all day long. Helicopters coming down because they're going to have a helipad. It's outrageous. And make no mistake, and I think Renee pointed this out, if and when this actually is built, this is it. This is the green light. And they're going to build it all over America. Because in America, particularly with AI and automation, we are becoming a jobless society. That's one thing I agreed with Andrew Yang on. I did not agree with his particular form of UBI, but we are going to become a jobless society because our government has sold the country to corporate America. That's why I call it the United Corporations of America. And they don't care if people can work or feed their family. That's not why they're there. We are not who they represent. So many communities, why the war machine is kept continually being fed is because in a lot of places, war is the economy. From weapon plants that make weapons, from plants that make bomber jets, plants that make the chemicals used in war. The East Palestine derailment on that route is the Abrams air missiles built in a military plant in Lima, Ohio, that go through that route that the train derailed. Could have something to do with why they tried to open up the track so quickly because they were making those Abrams air missiles in Lima, Ohio, routing them through that Norfolk Southern route through East Palestine to the east, and then sending them to Ukraine. But this police compound, it's going to be big business. There's a lot of corporations that are funding it, and it is going to create economic stimulus in the mines, according to some in the Atlanta City Council. And creating military compounds like this are going to create jobs. But what is the answer? Atlanta is up there in terms of impoverished cities. Is this going to shrink down the poverty level in Atlanta? No. Of course not. Is this going to help with tensions between the community and police? Clearly not. But if they get it through here, maybe it won't be in the woods in your community. Maybe it'll be a little smaller. It's the same principle. By the way, this Cop City, they're talking about having them do cross-training with the Israeli Mossad. Why would you need cross-training with the Israeli Mossad for police trainees in Atlanta, Georgia? Absolutely crazy. I do not think you're going to see these protests slow down. Frankly, a lot of the protesters made the point that I think is accurate. We have done everything we're supposed to do. We have gone to our elected representatives. We've done nonviolent protests, and you rammed it through anyway. And when that happens, and when you do all the things you're told by the United Corporations of America to do as a good U.S. citizen, and they still ignore you, and we're not talking about a 50-50 issue. We're talking about a 95-5 issue. And the 5 is basically the police foundations, and the corporations funding it. When you ignore the will of the people, don't be surprised when it turns from nonviolent to violent. Which then they turn around and say, see, this is why we need the police. We'll ignore the will of the people. We'll brutalize the people as they exercise nonviolent protests. We'll then arrest them for domestic terrorism. And then when they get violent, we'll say, see, we need police to justify and to staff our crackdown on the fact that we are turning into a fascist country. It's truly unbelievable. Let me read some other super chats. 222. Dave L, $5. If this is what Peter Dow jumped ship for, it speaks to Brana's ability as a pitchman. I do not believe Peter Dow has jumped ship to Cornel West's campaign. I don't think he's involved at all. I know he left Marianne Williamson's campaign. There's different reasons I've heard. I know, unfortunately, his mother is sick, but I don't think that's accurate that Peter Dow's involved in this campaign. Tony Dallas, $5. Chris Hedges wrote a piece on Cornel's run. Is there any way we could get him on the show? Maybe he knows something we don't. Yeah, I've had Chris Hedges on before. I have no problem asking him on again. I don't know if he has particular inside knowledge of Cornel West running as an MPP, but yeah, I'll ask him on again. I already read Zaina's chat. Caitlin, $2. Politicians can justify anything for jobs. Ain't that the truth? Ain't that the truth? And that's one of the stories I've been covering recently in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, who literally will not respond to us or any media that has reached out to her for comment on why the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, a Democrat, in 2021 approved a $125 million bond deal to help Graphic Packaging, a multi-billion dollar packaging company, expand when Gretchen Whitmer's administration knew and had the complaints from poor Black residents that this paper mill was poisoning the community with toxic gas. She won't respond, and the media is not going to challenge her. And in my view, why they look at it as just acceptable collateral damage to poison this Black community is because Graphic Packaging is one of the biggest employers in Kalamazoo. That's what happens when we live in a neoliberal hellscape and we don't make anything in America anymore. Government allows corporations to do whatever the fuck they want because they're deathly afraid that if they actually regulate corporations or govern corporations, or dare I say, provide criminal consequence for corporations that poison constituents, poison the constituents they represent, that those corporations will say, okay, goodbye. We're going to go to China, Mexico, or elsewhere. That's what's going on in Kalamazoo. That's what has gone on in Detroit, in Flint, in the Rust Belt, and beyond. The United States government has been sold to corporations. That's why we have the flag. That's why we live in the United Corporations of America. And get your United Corporations of America shirt in the Status Coup store in time to hit the beach, the pool, or the lake this summer. StatusCoup.com/store. Our products are made from the most environmentally friendly cloth. Had to get that in there. Did I miss anything? No, I don't think. I had a couple other topics, but I'll have to move them to another day because I got to go help put the baby down to sleep. We'll be back here tomorrow. Lewis will be live. We'll have more new reporting on the East Palestine disaster. As a reminder, we are trying to send Tina Desiree Berg back to Atlanta later this month to cover the next week of action against Cop City. This reporting costs a lot of money. There's plenty of people on the internet that talk and give hot takes. Very few of them on the left or right actually go out on the ground in the field. We do. We're not just sitting in our studio bloviating. We get out there and we cover these things up close. It costs a lot of money. So please, if you're new to Status Coup, subscribe to the channel. But if you can't consider signing up as a member, statuscoup.com/join. You could support our on-the-ground reporting for $5 to $10 a month. It makes a huge difference. We got 2 signups yesterday. Hopefully we can get some more today. Thank you, Colin, behind the scenes. We're also trying something different, so be on the lookout tonight. We're going to post another video. We have such a big archive of on-the-ground content, and a lot of people have not seen all of our on-the-ground content because we have new subscribers a lot of the time. So we're going to start, I don't want to say republishing, but we're going to start recirculating some of our on-the-ground reporting from previous trips. Me kind of starting the video with either a new development in the story, so there might be an update in the story even from years ago, and then going back and showing some of that old on-the-ground content, or if there's nothing new per se, kind of a retrospect or reflecting on it. So it's more content. Weaving in more of our on-the-ground reporting, which is a good way to show new people that come to the channel or people that never saw it because they didn't know about Status Coup when we were on the ground, that we're not just covering stuff now. Look at all the places we've been. Hopefully, not just to have more content, but hopefully as a way to show people we're predominantly an on-the-ground reporting outlet, and consider supporting us to do more. So tonight we'll probably have a video on the Mountain Valley Pipeline with some updates. There was a protest today against Joe Manchin, President Manchin, we should say, running with the parliamentarian for 2024. Climate activists shut down a speech he was giving earlier today, or an interview he was giving earlier today. So we'll have a video on that, and then weave in some of my previous reporting from Virginia covering Mountain Valley Pipeline. Another super chat, Relly, $4.99. What does MPP have to do to positively cover West campaign? If they address all your order concerns, but Brana is still head, is that a deal breaker? I mean, to me, the broader issue is not whether Brana is at the top or not. Maybe that's the issue for some people. To me, I see no evidence they actually have an infrastructure. So if they surprise us all, if they have a bang up media strategy, if they put out incredible events with Cornel West that have people turning out, there's buzz. If they start cranking out evidence that they have momentum, getting him on ballots in multiple states, I'll cover it. I mean, to me, it's not only about Nick Brana, but the proof will be in the pudding if that happens. I'm not holding my breath whatsoever. And to that person, I don't think it's just about. I think you're kind of deducing it just to about Nick Brana. It's about more than just about Nick Brana. It's about, I mean, people have donated hundreds of thousands of dollars over years to this organization, and it's gone nowhere. In many cases, it has been squandered. So it's not just about that I don't trust or have a personal dislike of Nick Brana, or the complaints coming from volunteers about mistreatment, racism, things like that. It's about this organization has basically sold a bill of goods to people, hardworking people that donated their money. This is the same complaint you hear from people that we got to stop sheep herding people in the Democratic Party because you're wasting good working people's money who are donating to these campaigns. So to me, that's what it's about. But for you to say, what would it take to cover? I'm not going to like bash Cornel West or be a jerk in coverage to him. Tell you the truth, I probably won't cover it much until there's something real to cover. If there's evidence of momentum or that, I'll invite Cornel West on for sure. I'm certainly going to ask him about MPP, about, his decision to run under their banner, given the things we've talked about. But to me, it's about more than Nick Brana. It's about the whole thing, which is basically a fraudulent organization that's hoodwinked people for 6-7 years at this point, and hasn't done anything. And as of 2 or 3 months ago, we're pushing a big PR thing to run Jimmy Dore. And when that failed, apparently went to plan B of running Cornel West. So if that's okay with you, okay. But to me, that doesn't seem promising. All right. So I got to go. Thank you for watching, and we will see you back here tomorrow. Have a good one.